So it looks like we got to do this part pretty quickly, but I wanted to go ahead and ask some very practical questions that hopefully can help with, some of the ways in which you all might approach bringing these technologies into your own organizations. So Zach and Jeremy, I would love if you could just talk about what do your teams look like when you're producing either an AR experience, both on the dev and creative sides? And what does your team look like when you're applying machine learning? Can you just really practically talk about the processes and the teams that bring those to life?
Sure. So we have people who are charged with sourcing the 3D models in the first place. So we do some of our own scanning, but oftentimes, in a lot of examples you're looking at are scans that were produced by others, either artists or through photogrammetry. So some people doing sourcing. Rarely is it the case that a model comes in and it's good to go straight into the app. So we have a few people on staff who will work on things like lighting. Lighting and shadows become like the whole thing, and without which it's not a really photorealistic experience. And so do that, and then
these are developers, 3D animators.
They're developers moonlighting as 3D animators. So we've not created a separate team dedicated entirely to this. We're not producing the volume enough to justify that.
Great.
So the team for the Represent project there, where we were summarizing each member of Congress's sort of political priorities, as well as some of the distinctive topics they care about, that was a team. There were 3 of us working on that project, along with a couple editors who edit all the computer programmer journalists, the news app developers at ProPublica. The project is run by a guy named Derek Willis, who knows everything there is to know about the U.S. Congress. And this website and the database behind it are sort of like an adjunct of his brain. Like every piece of data you could gather about the US Congress is in there somewhere because Derek knows about it. And so one of the things they have is we've gotten there is these press releases. And the machine learning aspect of it was all me. And between Derek and my editors, we went back and forth over a while to figure out what the best way was to summarize to use this sort of understanding of US politics that the computer had gained from this database, figure out the best way to use that to summarize something about each member of Congress for our readers. And iterated a bunch, and what you saw on the screen is what came out.
Thank you. And definitely if people have questions, feel free to come up to the mics. So something that you mentioned in your presentation is these videos using AI to do nefarious things. Jared, I know that a lot of the conversation around blockchain is that it can help with transparency and trust in journalism. So I wonder, anyone who has thoughts on the panel, could we talk a little bit about, is there an intersection between those two things? Can you fact check, or can blockchain be used to help fact check some of these, fakes that might be coming down the pipe? Or, what are the ways in which blockchain helps us with transparency and trust?
Sure. So, much of its value is there. This idea of giving economic incentives for people to do certain things that help results, or help move you towards the results that you're looking for. So there's actually some media companies out today. Civil is one, CIVIL, Join Civil, which is a new media company built on blockchain, built on that trust and community sources of token curated registries and a lot of more acronyms and buzzwords that I will not waste the little amount of time that we have here. But yes, this idea of community enablement, setting certain rules, right, and smart contracts and things that you must abide by. I think what's important to recognize, and again, going down to the rowdy and the dowdy of blockchain, is that there's very much a gray area, right? And I like to look at it, especially from a poet perspective, that we're enabling. We're not going to just come out and disrupt how things work today. So things like machine learning or AR or VR, we were talking about the other day, there are certain components in libraries that will help enable those experiences. They're not so much to replace them, but I think based on how you look at those things and take advantage of the different factors that blockchain could offer, both technically and also through the way that you build this community and through token incentivization, then yes, I mean, the quick answer is yes, there's a lot of opportunities.
So then I guess I have a question for the three of you. I know that obviously we're in a hugely difficult time in this industry in terms of staying afloat and generating revenue. And a big struggle that I had in the last 2 years was justifying what I was doing. And to be totally transparent, a lot of the projects that I just showed you on the screen, I had to go outside of our company to fundraise for. That production budget was not coming from within our company. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about how does the work that each of you are doing relate to a larger strategy around the business of your company, if at all? Maybe it's completely separate and you have the ability to do some R&D that doesn't have to be tied to revenue. What are the ways in which it's related to your organization's businesses?
So I very much live on the editorial side, so I can't speak too much to revenue, but I do know that within, in terms of worth, I love R&D departments. I think they're awesome, and I like going to play with their things, but we've been making hopefully an actual product that can be used, and a tool that might be applicable elsewhere. So I also previously worked for the BBC, and I had a similar role there, which is to kind of originate things and also make sure that they were immediately usable by other parts of a bigger organization. So we are already sort of speaking with other parts of NBC about what we're doing might be applicable or might be useful. So there's worth in that.
Yeah, I think about this a lot. It's a huge risk for a news organization to be distracted by like whatever feels like the next thing and overinvest in areas that aren't like connected to the core of what we're actually trying to do for our users or for where we generate our revenue. So our approach to that is twofold. So one, our specific product strategy at Quartz is the products we release are manifestations of what Quartz's journalism is all about, specific to that platform. Our emails are supposed to be read as emails. They don't point back to the website. They're just supposed to be really good emails. Our charting platform, Atlas, is that and only that. And our app, as you know, you could only experience it as an app. It has no particular relationship to our website. That's just inherent to our strategy and what we're trying to do. So part of this is like baking it into like that's what Quartz is. I don't think that would work necessarily for another news organization, but it works for us because that is what we are. And then the second is to the point about R&D. We established about 2 years ago what we call the workshop. It's run by a single person, and Sam Williams, who was the original developer on the app and had a lot to do with developing AR in the app last year. And his job is detached from the day-to-day and is charged with experimenting with new technologies, helping others in the organization do that. There's an actual workshop that was pictured in one of the videos I shared where like messing around is the point, but it's a single person, and we're trying very deliberately to make it not an R&D lab in the sense that it's on a different floor or detached from the day-to-day. And I guess finally, wait till next month for the first AR ad in the app, and that's we would view part of what whether something is working or not is whether we can connect it back to the core business. Our core business is advertising, and so stay tuned.
I'm entirely news side, so I don't know a whole lot about the revenue question. But one of the neat things that makes the sort of investment in one of these machine learning sorts of things sort of worthwhile is that once you've sort of trained this model, you can keep feeding new stuff into it. With the example of the Congress press releases database, every week we get a whole bunch of new press releases, feed them in, and those numbers will change a little bit. If Paul Ryan decides to stop talking about taxes and talk more about transportation for whatever reason, his transportation number will go up. That all happens while I'm doing other stuff. This probably happened yesterday morning, because it happens to go on Friday mornings. And I'm doing other stuff. And so since we have this investment in this evergreen Congress database, the investment in machine learning, as opposed to an investment in a gazillion interns, means that it's just sort of infinitely repeatable as long as the power stays on and Amazon continues renting us computers.
And just one thing around that, because Zach said something that I think is key, and I'll put on my post hat that I did before this job where I ran R&D on the commercial side, is that I think the biggest successes for funding a lot of these endeavors is to move away from the idea of platform dependence, to Zach's point, but even like at a higher philosophical level, right? At the Post, through ARC projects and Red, and I'm looking at Trey and what Vox is doing too, it's this idea that you get something extremely unique and valuable with a partnership with a publisher, but that is something that could live everywhere, right? And that's a complete change of thought from 7, 8, like a decade ago, where we used to say, hey, come work at the Huffington Post where I was, and we'll build something for you that could only live on the Huffington Post, and that's the value of working with the Huffington Post. Now it's this idea of, hey, work with us, we could build something innovative, you could run against our audiences, but also take it to go wherever you so wish. And I think that that's extremely important to realize for the success of broadening revenue streams and experimentation, that there is benefit with things living outside of your ecosystem as long as you're a partner there.
Okay, that's it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.